Coming up today on The Story.
In 1968, we had so-called spring, Prague Spring, and that was crushed by Russian invasion. One day we woke up and the Prague was full of tanks. There were hundreds and hundreds or thousands, I don't remember how many, but the tanks were all over. Then we felt that if we don't leave the country, that's going to kind of be end of our, not our physical life, but basically our professional life.
The Story.
G'day, I'm Jimmy Colefax. Welcome to The Story. Well, as we'll hear today, Pavel and Klara Steiger grew up living under an oppressive communist regime in what was then known as Czechoslovakia. Eventually, they fled the country and ended up in the United States, where they then went on a spiritual journey. This ultimately led to them ministering to people back in their home country without even being there. Pavel and Klara will share their remarkable story with us as they have a chat with Eric Scatterbo in our Melbourne studios.
We have some special guests in the studio today. Welcome to the program, Klara and Pavel Steiger.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And before we get started, anything you'd like to say about the folk music that we just listened to?
Well, it's a folk music from Moravian region of Czech Republic, and I just want to say that there are two regions, the Bohemian part of Czech Republic and Moravian part of Czech Republic. And this is from the Moravian part, which is closer to Hungarian border. That's why it is more rhythmic and melancholic, and lots of strings are there. The Czech music would be more brass.
Oh, okay. Now, you mentioned Bohemian part of the country. Now, it's interesting that we were talking before we started the interview, whenever there is a arty part of a city, where that's where the playwrights and the artists and the musicians hang out, they always say, oh, it's a very bohemian part of town. And that comes from part of Czechoslovakia?
It basically comes from the Czech part of today's Czech Republic. But of course, remember that Czechoslovakia was formed after the World War II. So before the 1914 or 18 actually, 1918, there was no Czechoslovakia. The Czechs were there, of course, the Moravians were there. But it was Austro-Hungarian Empire. And before that, it was Holy Roman Empire. And the kings like the Rudolf II, who was the Habsburg, actually, he was a little bit, he invited lots of artists, he invited lots of scientists, lots of witchcraft people and so on to Prague. And Prague is the center of Bohemia, Bohemian part of that part of the world. And that's why Prague attracted all these strangers. And actually, even the scientists like Johannes Kepler was there, and Tycho Brahe, and actually Casanova is buried in Czech Republic, what is today.
The famous lover.
Yeah, the famous lover. So you can see that all these, they were attracted there. Some kind of, if I may say, like San Francisco of the United States, okay? That's...
And you're not from the Bohemian side then?
Well,
yes,
we
are.
We are.
Well, we are Bohemian side. My father was Moravian and my mother was Slovak. So I am Czechoslovak truly.
Oh, okay.
But Klara, she's got even more interesting background.
I'm even further. My father is from southern Bohemia and my mother is from Ukraine, so I go even farther east.
Okay, do you have any artists in your family?
Pavel's brother and my brother-in-law, he is a famous toy collector. He is cartoonist, he is a movie producer and everything else. He is well-known personality in especially Germany and throughout Europe. He's been publishing all around the world.
Excellent.
His cartoons and paintings and everything else. So he is the true artist in the family.
Kind of keeping that artistic bohemian tradition going.
And he really is very vibrant and kind of immortal man.
Oh,
He has plans for 1,000 years to come.
Wow, what a guy. Alrighty, well, let's find out a little bit more about your background. You obviously grew up in Czechoslovakia. Let's find out, what was it like growing up there?
Well, actually, to make the history a little bit more complex and complicated, I was not born in Czechoslovakia. I was born in, just a second, I was born in Prague, of course, however, when I was born, it was Protectorate Bohemia and Moravia because the World War II was going on, so Czechoslovakia did not exist. The Hitler actually cancelled the country, okay? Not the land, of course, but the country was cancelled, so I was born in
a cancelled country.
In a cancelled country. Yeah. However, in Prague, okay. So I grew up over there, of course, as a Czech, and our native tongue, that's my mother tongue, and Klara's mother tongue is Czech, so we do not have any accent in Czech. We have accent, of course, in English. And I probably might say that the parents took good care of us. My father, he was the businessman, and it was okay till, let's say, the communists took power in 1948. And when they took the power in 1948, then my family was expelled from Prague, and I'm sure some of our listeners will know it, that they were forced to move out of the city, and he was placed to coal mines, and I think it was very heartbreaking on my mother. She basically died prematurely, probably, I'm sure, because of broken heart, and it was quite sad story. So in 1952 we were expelled from Prague and to a mining town, and basically it conditioned even my occupation, because I later on studied the mining university over there, and I became a mining engineer.
Okay, and Klara, how was it growing up?
The life under communism was quite difficult for basically every family, because the fear of the communism, there was a constant threat that you can become the traitor and so on, and end up in the prison or expelled from the town, or there were many ways how they could persecute you and kind of keep you the way they wanted to have their citizens to behave. And so it was dark age, kind of grim time to live on, because we were living basically like in the cage. There was an iron curtain, so we could not get anywhere out of the country, basically living under the communist rule, under the dictatorship. So it was kind of gloomy life.
And I imagine spiritually it was dark as well?
And spiritually, basically, there was no spiritually at all, because it was kind of dimmed by the communism, because communists are atheists. That's the number one sign of that. So as we were growing up and living through our adult age, I would say till my age of 25, I never met a Christian who would stand the biblical definition. There was some religiosity. We were baptized as children or like that, but that was mainly by tradition, not by conscious mind and decision that you are a believer.
Yeah, maybe I would like to add to it, because I grew up in a Catholic family. I was an altar boy, and then it seems to me that after 1952, even the Catholicism somehow faded out. Basically, after I was about 12, 13, 14 years old, I became, I would say, an atheist or agnostic, or I didn't ask too many questions about it.
Okay. And then eventually you left. Tell us about that.
Well, in 1968, we had so-called Prague Spring, and that was crushed by Russian invasion. One day we woke up, that was on the August 21st, and the Prague was full of tanks. There were hundreds and hundreds or thousands, I don't remember how many, but the tanks were all over. And that was the end of the few months we had of kind of beginning of the freedom, and that was a terrible thing which happened. Basically everybody was in shock, and the Russian soldiers, they had no idea where they are. They came to help to crush the revolution. Of course there was no revolution, there was just a little bit of more of free environment, and so that was the end for us, and we felt that if we don't leave the country, that's going to kind of be end of our, not our physical life, but basically our professional life and whatsoever. So we decided to leave the country, and at that time there was over 100,000 people left. So we were among those who were on time because about 6 weeks after we left, the government canceled all the passports and they closed the borders, and that was impossible to leave or to go anywhere. And next 20 years, basically, it was again very strict regime of so-called normalization. And when we left, we went to Austria. In Austria, we were waiting for 5 months for our immigration processing, and we came to United States in 1970, January of 1970.
I would like to add that we had 2 boys, actually, 2 children when we left. One was 1 year old, the other one was 2 years old. So it was, we had just full hands of kids. And,
and we burned the bridges.
And we just left with, do I know if I had maybe $5 of what it was, everything.
Yeah.
So you came to the United States? And then
we
what
came
happened?
to the United States, and since I was a mining engineer, as I mentioned it before, I got quite quickly a job in a small town in northern Idaho. So first 5 years we spent in northern Idaho, and it was marvelous. I'll tell you, the people were so nice to us. It was a small town. There is a Lions Club and Rotary Club, and we immediately became their project. So they helped us with everything. I couldn't believe, how the people helped us in Idaho, and believe or not, in 1 week we had an apartment, and they brought new and even used things, the furniture. They filled up the refrigerator. We have even needles since then.
And playing cards and everything was there.
Playing cards and everything. So it was really, really nice.
And was it hard to adapt to a new country?
Well, of course it is hard. The number one was that we came from the large city and we moved into small community of 2,000. It was a mining community, and it was, the northern Idaho was kind of very beautiful by the nature and all the attractions which were kind of outdoors style of living, the fishing and hunting and so on, which we were never ever exposed to that. It was totally different, but the friendship of people and their welcome was absolutely marvelous. So they just did not leave us alone. They were constantly after us and asking the questions and bringing the goods and inviting us for all kind of social things and so on. So we had no choice then to adapt, and it was the best even for learning the language, because we did not have any Czechs around, so we were forced to swim. And it was yes, exactly, and it was an absolutely marvelous experience.
And actually, I probably should mention, since we are now on the radio, a little episode over there. We were in that little town, Osborne, Idaho, for about, maybe 3-4 months. So our English was very, very limited, and we were invited to see the studio, the local radio. Just imagine those little towns; they have even their radio stations, and we were just chatting, with our broken English, which is still broken, but we were chatting with the guy just like with you, and we did not realize that he just put us on the air. So all that funny talk we did, it was on the air, and then immediately, absolutely everybody knew us in that little town.
Even the next town and next town. So we became,
and we didn't know about it, that we were on the air. Absolutely, we didn't know about it. So
and that was kind of funny, because everybody knew us. So when we would walk to the drugstore or to the store, so we would hear all the time, "Hi, Paul. Hi, Klara," and we didn't know who is greeting us.
Oh, wow!
But it was really friendly and fun time.
So that was kind of the start of your radio career, which we'll talk about later. But
absolutely, that was the first time.
You're listening to The Story. Today, Eric Scadabo is chatting with Pavel and Klara Steiger, who are tracing their life journey for us. As we heard, they went on from living under an oppressive communist regime in the former Czechoslovakia to living in a small community in Idaho in the United States. Next, we'll hear about the spiritual journey they went on as well. All that and more when we return.